So just a little more background. So about a year ago, Erica reached out to a professional organization that I'm involved with to find someone to do some training with docents. And so it was, kind of a fun opportunity for me that I was really excited to take on. So in the spring, I don't know if any of you were here, but so in the spring of last year, like April maybe, late April, I came to the docent training then for the spring and summer exhibit, and to see what was in place. I said, okay, well, I don't know how to make suggestions without knowing what you are doing, so let's just start there. So I kind of came as though I was a docent. And then I tagged along to some of the fourth grade field trips, tours, thank you, that's the right word, maybe about a month later, which was kind of fun. So I just walked around, took notes, observed the students, observed the docents to see kind of how things happened. And then I talked to Erica and I said, okay, well, first of all, let me just commend you because you do so much. So really, her training, I think, is spot on. And I said, so I just had a few minor suggestions for her, which I'll get to a little bit later, but I said, I really think you're nailing it, especially the way she has so many different ideas for how to explain the art and talk about the art with kids, and that kind of thing, where she gives her, I can't remember what she called them, but where she gives a sheet.
Tips and tricks.
Tips and tricks.
Yep.
That's it. So like, what a great idea. So first I just want to say that I don't, I don't want to discount the fact that she is doing a fantastic job, and I think, the kids that come in and the kids that I observed are really benefiting from the expertise that she is already sharing, and the knowledge and the understanding that she has of what docents really need to be prepared and to share with the fourth graders. And I have a full plate right now, but it really made me want to be a docent just because I wanted to learn more myself. So it was just fun. It was a really fun thing to come and be able to be a part of. So I put this together to maybe just put a little bit of naming, like name a little bit of what she's already doing and give you guys just kind of some basic tools to, I guess, to just build a little bit more of a foundation on what she's already doing, under what she's already doing. So, for starters, just some kind of statistics. So when you look at who is walking in the doors, and this is largely looking at K-12 students, so we can assume that this is approximately what you're gonna have when you're working with a group of fourth graders, or whatever age. Obviously, everybody's a little bit different. One size does not fit all. Fourth grade is, to me, kind of a funny time. You've got the smaller boys a lot of times. Sometimes you've got some little girls, but you've got some taller girls that have hit a growth spurt. Maybe they've hit puberty already, and they look like they're 15 and they're 9 or whatever. So you just where they are physically and in their bodies can vary a lot. You've got cultural diversity. You've got kids with abilities and disabilities. Approximately 11% of students have ADD or ADHD, so there's also that to deal with. About 5% of students have a specific learning disability, which learning disabilities include dyslexia, dysgraphia, dysnomia. Dyslexia, of course, is the one that everybody thinks they know a lot about. Not everybody maybe quite has it right, but that's okay. and a lot of that also includes verbal processing difficulty, which means you could be sharing all kinds of information and you lost a kid 3.5 minutes ago, so because they're still taking in the name or the colors or the patterns or whatever you're standing in front of them looking at. About 2.5% of students have a communication disorder. That could also include a specific communication disorder is its own thing, but kids on the autism spectrum also have communication disorders. That's really the large piece of autism. So that sometimes would include a student on the spectrum. But then we also have another 1.5 or 1.2% of students on the autism spectrum, which affects attention and communication and social perception and multiple things. Okay, comments or questions about any of this? And I don't know how often you get students that come in with any kind of physical disabilities or in a wheelchair or anything like that, but it probably doesn't happen very often. Or students that are blind or deaf, it's a very, very, less than 1% or even 0.5%. So some things to consider with strategies that, again, I think Erica does extremely well and this is a little bit of an overview. I'm going to get to each one, but inclusion means that everybody's in the room, okay? And you do that really well. You're grouping kids, they're all together. Differentiation is everyone gets a specific accommodation. And again, I'll talk to that in a second. But universal design, and that's really what I want to kind of bring home, is that everyone has multiple accommodations available to them. And again, that's one thing that I told Erica I thought she was doing really well. Okay, so let's break those each down. So what is inclusion? In terms of special education, inclusion is providing services within the general education classroom. True and 100% inclusion would mean speech is in the regular classroom, OT or PT, any type of explicit instruction for reading or math. It's really pretty difficult to do and implement full inclusion. Schools might say, if any of you have siblings or children or nieces or nephews that are in schools and you hear, oh, we're a full inclusion school. It kind of depends how they're defining inclusion. Typically, a school will say they are doing or implementing full inclusion because they're putting the kids that have an IEP and have a disability, they're in the classroom for most academics. That doesn't necessarily mean that it's what they need or the services that they're supposed to be getting. However, at the same time, that is typically the goal for students with disabilities. We don't want them to be singled out. We don't want them to be excluded. We want them to pick up and have normal social behaviors, which means they need typical peers around them to be examples and all of that. To an extent, this also includes students with culturally diverse backgrounds. Obviously we want schools to be integrated, not segregated. We want kids to learn from each other. We want students to, and schools to celebrate differences and not just ignore them, right? So there's a piece of that as well. Inclusion is more and more common, but it's also very cyclical, where in the last 25 years or so, the trend is like, okay, we're going to do full inclusion. We're going to put everybody with a disability. Everything's going to be inclusive. And then there's like, oh well, this Jordan over here, he's kind of struggling. Maybe he should go out for reading. And then Sam over here, she needs. And then it slowly gets kind of parsed out and it's not really inclusion anymore. And then all of a sudden there's 10 years down the road, man, we should be doing inclusion. And we sweep them all back in, we put them all, and then so it really, the point of special education really as it was established in the mid-70s, was to make it individual. So that's kind of my platform is, inclusion is great. We should have inclusion to whatever extent we can, but we also need to be looking at each individual and making sure that they're getting what they need. And sometimes inclusion is not the best environment. You know, if you've got a regular teacher, say you've got a 4th grade teacher, these kids that are all coming into the museum, and the teacher has, I don't know, say 25 kids and 4 of them have an IEP. Are all of you familiar with that language? Do you know what an IEP is?
No, it's not IEP. I'm
Okay.
guessing it's a special education program.
Right, so it's the document, it's a piece of paper, basically, that specifies all the services that the student needs, and students can only get them if they're identified as having a disability.
Gotcha.
Yeah, so it's an individualized education plan.
Gotcha.
Yeah. But it's a piece of paper. So in and of itself, it doesn't do anything. It's this, you know, then the school has to know what's in it and all that. So what sometimes it'll look like is, that's where it was, 4th grade teacher, for kids that have an IEP, so it's specifying, say they need extra reading instruction. Maybe they're a year, 2 years behind in reading, which would be a very typical circumstance or situation. Then a special ed teacher comes in and is working with those 4 kids in the back of the room at a table while the gen ed teacher is doing instruction with the rest of the kids. See, that's not inclusion. That's parallel teaching. You know, 2 things are going on at once. So it just needs to be evaluated and looked at really closely. Okay, I didn't come to get on my soapbox about any of that, but just to kind of set the stage and look at, kind of get the terminology. So that's inclusion. It's a great idea. Doesn't always work as intended. Okay, differentiation, kind of a similar thing. So differentiation is when instruction is tailored to meet individual students. And in the world of education right now, and especially teacher prep, which is where I am in higher ed, so I'm preparing teachers to go out. Differentiation has been a huge buzzword and really still is. And what this looks like is, say you have a visual impairment, and I guess I'm saying that because you're wearing glasses, yes. But say your glasses didn't correct your vision and you can't see. So for you, I might be doing it, maybe somebody else is doing it, but we're enlarging all of your print. And you have a book, you need special textbooks and large font. And maybe when I do my PowerPoints, when I create my PowerPoints, I'm using really large font. Actually, that's not a very good example. It would be that I'm doing them just for you. Okay. And then say you have a hearing impairment and you maybe you wear hearing aids and it corrects some of it. You can hear a little bit, but I move your seat when I'm teaching so that you're close to me, so you have a better chance of hearing. Okay. And then so maybe you have an attention issue.
Oh yeah.
And you are very wiggly and distracted, and so I make sure that you have a special chair. Maybe you're sitting on a stability ball, which gives you a little bit of sensory input. So as I'm teaching, I make sure that I have to pay attention. I have to find you and make sure you're in the right seat. I mean, most classes you would have an assigned seat, but say for whatever reason, chairs move around,
My seat's the one with the big ball. Got it.
Yeah. What's really cool, if you haven't seen them, there are schools where the whole classrooms have stability balls.
I have.
And they have a little pedestal so that they do what they're supposed to do in the kind of the sensory input, and a kid can still wiggle on it, but they can't fall. They don't fall off quite as easily. They don't roll away quite as easily.
Do you have like office chairs that are kind of designed where it has that
Yes.
holder for
Yes.
the ball and a little back, but you can still bounce.
Yeah, it's supposed to be good for your posture too.
Yeah.
So and so on, and then maybe Nikki over here, because she's the only one I know her. her name. She has dyslexia, and so for every lesson I'm implementing, I'm giving her an assignment that's just for her, that's at a lower reading level. So it's still the same content, but I'm rewriting maybe the homework so that Nikki can complete it. Okay, it's kind of exhausting just explaining it, right?
I have a question. I don't know if
Yeah.
this is a little off topic. Dyslexia, is it true that there are certain fonts that are easier for people with dyslexia to read? Or is that kind of an individual case by case?
It's probably individual. I don't know. I think there are fonts that are easier to read myself, and I don't have dyslexia. So it's probably, I don't know. I've never heard anything specific to that, or if any research has been done on that, but I wouldn't doubt it.
There's a lot to do that I've seen. I took an exceptionalities course when I was in college, and we talked a lot about color with dyslexia, and like certain color fonts on certain color backgrounds can sometimes make the text seem more placed on a screen or something, especially for people working on screens a lot, because so much of our education now is like tablets and screens. But other than that, I don't know if you know about that.
No. Well, I've heard that there's some pretty fuzzy science with the color, and so I don't know. It would depend on the study and how the study was done and who decided that.
Definitely.
But you know, the one thing, schools aren't taking the time to teach cursive anymore. There's just no time, and that's probably a shame in a lot of ways. But schools are taking the time to teach keyboarding skills, which makes sense in this day and age. So it's not like you can say, "Oh, that's a horrible thing." But so so it kind of depends where that information came from. I mean, it would make perfect sense that it would be harder for anyone, certainly someone with dyslexia, to read cursive font. I think cursive font is sometimes, depending on how scrolly it is. But I've not heard that specifically. That would be interesting to.
I think it wasn't specific regarding type font on like computers and stuff, and I think it was, if I'm not mistaken, like Comic Sans, which is very distinctive kind of looking, but very rounded, and all the letters are very kind of themselves.
I would think that would be an easier one.
That's what I had heard.
Oh, that it was eezier. Yeah.
Than like your Times New Roman, where everything's kind of blocky and squished.
Well, or think of the A's. That's the one thing about Comic Sans. An A is like this versus that extra loop. The newsprint, that's Times New Roman. Yeah. If you're interested, there's it's about an hour long, but there's a really, really good film called Fat City. FAT is an acronym for frustration, anxiety, and tension. And it was a workshop that was filmed, and the purpose of the workshop was to simulate what it's like to have a learning disability, and they focus a lot on talking about dyslexia. It's dated, it's from the late 80s, early 90s, so it's kind of funny to see like the hairstyles and the clothes and stuff, but the content is so good. And he talks, the presenter, so the name is Fat City, How Difficult Can This Be? You can find it on YouTube, but it might be a little bit annoying because it's broken into segments. If you could find a DVD of it, that's what I would recommend, because you can, or if you can get access to it online.
Akron Public Library has it online for free. If you have an Akron Public Library card, we had to watch it for our exceptionalities course that I took. Good? Yeah, it's really good.
It's really good.
And we all just got it through the free online resource through Akron Public.
The whole idea is that the way kids with a learning disability usually feel is frustrated, anxious, and tense because of what they're struggling with, and as teachers, we typically just make it worse for them. So it's a really great explanation and overview. I would highly recommend it. It's about an hour. I honestly, you'll want to share it with as many people as you can, or certainly anyone who you thought has ever struggled, or I showed in classes when I teach intro to special ed. I just showed it a couple weeks ago, and I always get at least one, sometimes two or three, where it's like, now I understand. Oh, this makes so much sense. Everybody should watch this. Can you send me the link so I can show it to my parents? So, you know, it's really, really insightful and helpful, and really, really interesting. Really interesting. I wish that they would update it to just make it a little more. Some of the language needs to be updated. Like he uses mental retardation, not in a negative way, but like in the late 80s, we were still saying that somebody, well, that's like, so now we say intellectual disability, and, you know, so it's like little things like that would be nice to kind of update, but mine at the same time. But anyway, so differentiation has its place. It really does. For me as an intervention specialist, which is just kind of another way of saying special education teacher, if I'm working with 4 students, like if you guys are my class, I should be differentiating. I would know exactly what everybody needs, and I would be able to do that for the time that you're with me. Like that would be what would be necessary. But if I'm a gen ed teacher and I'm expected to differentiate, and I've got you 4 plus another 24 or 20, that's where differentiation is like really like that's pretty hard. So it's helpful. It can be helpful and important, but it's very time consuming. So this is a classic, great visual. You know, so you've got all these kids doing all these different things. Why aren't you differentiating? You know. To that too. I took it out. I've got another. You know, and I took them out because they're so teacher based. But like, if you Google, I did a Google images of when I was putting this together. I did Google images of differentiation to find some visuals, and they also came up with some book titles, and it was like 8 ways to differentiate your lesson plans. I thought, who has time for that? And another one was like, how to survive differentiation in the classroom. It's like, so that's like, people know differentiating is it's a good thing, but it's too much. It's too much for teachers. It's too much for teachers to do. Okay, so which leads us to universal design. So in the classroom, we'll get to kind of how this translates to the classroom. But so this quote here, universal design is the design of products and environments to be usable by all people to the greatest extent possible without the need for adaptation or specialized design. So you've got Captain Hook here. A doorknob is going to be very difficult for him. He's not going to be able to open a doorknob. If you put a handle, he's going to be able to open that. But a woman with a stroller is going to have a difficult time now with a door handle. And, you know, because we all see dogs pushing shopping carts with puppies, the electric door, the automatic electric door, now even a dog can go in, right? But then the hook can go in through an electric door, and mom with her child can go in through an electric door. So that's the whole concept. So actually the law, the Americans with Disabilities Act from 1990, says that public spaces have to be equipped for and accessible for people with disabilities. And it wasn't at that point that the whole like it was named universal design, but that's really what it's become. So like for example, there's a ramp leading to the door out here. So what is a little surprising to me is that there's a sign that says for wheelchairs only.
Yeah.
It's really not great first person language, but it's also, why would you even want to say that? Like if someone is coming along on crutches, or what if you have a mom with a stroller? So I just noticed that on my way in, and I thought, why is that sign there? I don't know, that would be my personal suggestion would be take the sign down, because it's there for anyone. And so if say it's a school, and if this was a school building and you had a child 1 year in a wheelchair, but then the child moves away after a year, you wouldn't take the ramp out. You would leave it, because inevitably someone's gonna come along, they're gonna be on crutches, or maybe in a couple years you'll have another child with a wheelchair, or maybe you'll have a grandparent that comes to grandparent day and they're either in a wheelchair or they can't maneuver stairs. So, so you leave the ramp, you wouldn't take the ramp down. Other things in the environment that are actually legal mandates, things like restaurants are supposed to have Braille menus. Not a lot of people need them, but they're supposed to be available. Elevators, if you have more than one floor, and elevators are supposed to have Braille writing on them. Accessible bathrooms, where they're those are things that we don't even think about, right? They're just there. Wider stalls, lower sinks, things like that. But that's really universal design. We don't take them in and out when we know people are coming. They're there, they're built in, they're permanent, and anyone can use them, whether they need them or not. But they're there for the people who need them, right? But then everyone else can use them as well. So that's the whole idea of universal design. So when it comes to something like the Canton Museum of Art and fourth graders, so that leads me up to right now. So how are you accommodating or building in the accommodations for anyone who might need them? So there are three areas of UDL for classrooms: representation, expression, and engagement. So we'll get to each of those. So representation is how are you presenting information about the artwork? So just as examples, lecture, small group, multimedia, technology, making connections, or drawing parallels, thank you, to the art by the docent. You're saying this is like, so making those kind of schematic connections for kids. Sensory examples, Erica did that last summer with these cotton balls and scents. It was great.
Oh yeah.
And then classroom time to create art. Again, something that is done here, I think, so well.
Yeah, with tours we have arts experience workshops with all the tour groups, and it's definitely awesome.
Yeah, and it's which is also engaging and fun, but it's a way to teach, right?
Yeah.
So that's the whole idea of representation. So how are you teaching material? But it really comes down to planning ahead. So I had a woman kind of argue with me once about UDL, and that it was just the same thing as differentiation. Because, well, differentiation is you're planning ahead. But the difference is with differentiation, you're planning for a specific child or with a specific need in mind. With UDL, you'd be considering maybe a specific child, but you're making those things available to everybody. So it's not just, I'm not just giving you a different text, or I'm not just giving you enlarged print. It would be like anybody can use it. Maybe somebody else would want to look at a bigger font. Maybe somebody needs glasses and they don't have glasses yet. And they'd be like, wow, this is I can see this so much better. That's what it is. And it takes the work off of the teacher really to be thinking specifically and individually. This TED Talk that I have this quote from on the right, I have some links. I was not going to show you a TED Talk today, but I have a bunch of links at the end. If I can, well, I sent this to Erica as a Google share, so she can always spread that around. But
Yeah, I'll ask her too.
if you have time, I don't remember how long the TED Talk was, but I'm a huge fan of TED Talks. so always so interesting.